finally some actual news about the upcoming Black Panther game. What's going on, everybody? My name is Blitzwinger, and ladies and gentlemen, yes indeed, if you're a Marvel fan, if you're a Black Panther fan, if you're an action-adventure game fan, there's a lot to be excited. Of course, if you guys enjoyed today's video, please don't forget to take a quick moment and leave a like. That would be very much appreciated. Thank you so very much for your kindness and your support. And without further ado, let's dive on in.
Avengers, with me.
Now, what are we talking about today? Well, there's this account on Twitter called Hope, or I guess the actual name is Ghost of Hope. And this person went ahead and dropped some very exciting developments and news about the Black Panther game. Now, it took me about a day to just kind of, scroll back through their history and see how often this person actually get things right versus getting things wrong, because apparently they're actually quite a prominent member of the Call of Duty community, getting tons of different leaks and announcements early and correctly, which is very important for the sake of our discussion, because of course you got to pass that credibility check in order to make sure that the news is actually credible. Now, of course, for those that don't know, yes, we're getting a brand new Black Panther game being made by EA and Cliffhanger Games, more specifically is the development house or the studio that will be building the game. And the announcement was actually released all the way back in 2023. We're now sitting here in 2025 with no trailers or updates or anything of the sort, but we finally get some news in the form of this post here. Now, let's go through it one by one, because there's definitely some really exciting elements revealed here. So first and foremost, we have the confirmation that this game will have an over-the-shoulder point of view, which is exciting because it basically means that it is most likely going to be something akin to The Last of Us, something akin to, let's say, the Dead Space video games, where essentially you have that camera right over the shoulder of your character. I am very, very curious how it will function in terms of the next point that was raised here, because it brings up and says that the game is going to go ahead and replicate authentic African martial arts mixed with superhuman strength and agility plus technology. So kind of the Wakandan tech mixed with the African martial arts at its root. And that makes me think, then, how do you execute that within the over-the-shoulder point of view? Just in the sense that when I think of something that is very like fighting mechanic based, right? Like a martial art usually will have striking involved. I don't really think of games that are over the shoulder. When I think of over the shoulder games, think more so of shooting games, not games that require a whole lot of hand-to-hand combat or melee range combat. I'm very curious to see how that will actually play out in terms of the actual feeling of that when we finally get the game in our actual hands and get to try out the game for ourselves. Now, this next point is very interesting, and I'm curious to hear your guys' opinion for it. I personally was not very happy to hear this, but let's dive into it first and foremost. Now, this rumor goes on ahead and says that we will actually, as the players, be able to choose who becomes Black Panther. The game will offer us a multitude of characters that we could then choose to take up the mantle of Black Panther and experience the story within that person's perspective. And not only will there be a story implication, but the actual weapons, armor, as well as gadgets will actually be unique to each one of those characters, which is interesting because it makes me think like there's a lot of characters here, all of whom you need to try to figure out how to make somewhat feel differently in terms of gameplay. That makes me think that the budget for this game is going to be ginormous, which kind of worries me in the sense that it's going to need to probably sell a lot of copies to be successful. But that's a rant for a whole nother time. Let's talk about what characters are going to be allegedly included as playable characters that we could choose to make Black Panther. First, we have, of course, the iconic T'Challa. That makes perfect sense. Then, interestingly enough, we have M'Baku, which when I think of him, I really think of a character that fights in a completely different style. Like, typically Black Panther is very agile and quick and fast, whereas M'Baku is much more lumbering and kind of relies on his giant strength and size. So, going to be interesting to see if they're going to lean into that. The next one is even more confusing because it is Azari, who's Black Panther and Storm's son. And that makes me question the timeline of this whole game because I don't understand how he could possibly be of age to like be the Black Panther while his dad is still like again, those things are definitely already raising some red flags in terms of I don't understand how that's going to work. But we then move on to Shuri. Does make sense here. And of course, we also have Killmonger. Interestingly enough, the rumor also says and more, which again makes me just think like, really, and more? You already went ahead and named 5 characters there, all of whom are going to supposedly have distinct weapons, abilities, gadgets, and there's even more to be included. Again, that sounds very ambitious, and who knows, maybe they could pull it off and make it epic, but it is definitely at least somewhat worrisome in terms of I would much rather you gave us one great gameplay feeling moment or one great gameplay controlling character where like you nail it as T'Challa and you give us some really cool acrobatics, some really cool gadgets, some really cool weapons, instead of kind of thinning yourself and giving us like a bunch of characters, all of whom maybe feel somewhat mediocre and not great. And all of my worries are increased even more when I saw this point in this particular tweet saying that the story reacts to your choices and actions with unique stories, missions, and dynamics, which again, kind of a little bit at least reminds me of something like Mass Effect, let's say, which is cool, but when I think of Mass Effect, it's almost like the character of Shepard to a certain extent became whatever we as the player wanted them to become. Whereas when I think of characters like T'Challa and M'Baku and Azari and Shuri and Killmonger, they're all established characters. Like they have a personality, they have a way that they behave. And so it's going to be kind of strange to then remove all that and just kind of make them like a blank slate in terms of just like, oh, this is just a body that looks like this. And then you as the player will get to choose who they are based on the decisions that you make. To me, it lends itself to a lot lazier storytelling in the sense that you don't have to worry about telling a really great story because you could always say, well, the story wasn't great because you as the player sucked at making good decisions. And that to me is something that I personally, at least for my way of playing games, I do not prefer. I am much more of a fan of something like Arkham Asylum. I really hope that they would follow that formula for this game, where essentially, hey, just give us a really excellent Black Panther that controls well, that has a really cool story, and put him into an interesting world, pitting him against some really cool villains, giving us some cool moments and boss fights, and I think that would be a recipe for success. Interestingly enough, it seems like they're going much more wider with this and kind of trying to make the, I guess, world feel a lot more expansive. And I will say, this point I'm actually kind of excited about because it does go on to say that you will be able to explore cities, as in plural cities, which is interesting, I guess, within Wakanda, savannas, and more that let you encounter both unique cultures and characters. So again, it sounds like a very ambitious title in terms of the breakdown here, much more so than I probably expected it to be. But I also do immediately have worries in the sense that I worry, can they actually do all of this in such a way where it would be good and exciting? I would much rather if the first game in this new series would be something that's a little bit smaller. Again, I know that I'm repeating myself here to a certain extent, but why not copy the formula of the Arkham series? Give us a smaller game that is really focused on just nailing down the mechanics, the characterization, and the world. Give us something a little bit of a smaller title first, and then you could level it up in the second game, just like Arkham City did, and give us a much larger open world and toy box to run around in and have fun with. But again, maybe that's just me. Maybe you guys will disagree. Maybe you don't have the same concerns that I do. Let me know down in the comments section below. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like I mentioned at the top. And of course, I will hopefully catch you guys here on the next one. In the meantime, I might actually go play a little bit of Marvel Avengers. Is that a crazy thing to say in 2025?